Starring Bela Day in...
But Ma, that's my favorite movie. Oh, well, all right. But don't you spend too much time in front of that TV, do you hear me? Yes, Ma.
May I have the envelope, please?
And the Oscar for Best Picture is presented to...
And the Oscar goes 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 to...
And the Oscar goes...
And the Oscar goes...
And the Oscar goes to...
The Oscar goes to...
The Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
The Oscar goes to...
And 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 the Oscar goes to...
The Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
So we have an exciting episode today, guys, which is going to be centered around the Academy Awards, since the show is going to be premiering on April 25th, which will make it the 93rd Academy Awards ceremony. So I thought, since the awards is coming up, that it would be a great time to talk about some nominated movies. So let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my podcast, But Ma, That's My Favorite Movie. And I am your host, B. Leday. Now, if you are new to this podcast, what I do is introduce movies. We may critique them a little, but that's not what it's all about. We normally have two different styles of episodes. The style we're doing today is where I have a theme, and I'll talk about two movies that have a plot that's centered around the subject of this episode. And what I do in this episode is I'll give an introduction of what the movie is about, and I give you the details of the beginning of the movie just up until the major plot point. So today's episode is titled, But Ma, That's My Favorite Oscar-Nominated Movie. Now, before we do get to the movies, I want to let you know about our social media. So please follow our social media pages for a sneak peek about upcoming episodes and what movies we'll be discussing. And I do that with a game called Guess the Theme / movie. And pretty much you can guess the theme by the stills of the particular movies that I'll have in the visual. Now, we are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we do have a website, which is butmathat'smyfavoritemovie.com. On that site, you can write reviews. You can give movie or theme suggestions that you would like to hear on the podcast. Now, all handles and the link to the website are in the note / description box below. And don't forget, if you are enjoying the episodes that you're hearing, to definitely give us a shout out by tagging our page on any of our social medias. And then also don't hesitate to give us a review on Apple or on the But Ma, That's My Favorite Movie website. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this theme. So what we're going to be talking about is movies that were nominated for an Oscar, but did not win the Oscar in its category of the Best Picture. So let's go ahead and get into it. The first movie we're going to talk about today, Lights, Camera, Action. A real loser is someone who's so afraid of not winning, he doesn't even try. That quote is by the Grandpa Edwin in the movie Little Miss Sunshine, which actually was nominated for Best Picture in 2006. This movie was released August 18th, 2006, and it was written by Michael Arndt. I think that's how you say it. He also wrote for Hunger Games Catching Fire, Toy Story 3, and Star Wars Episode 7. The director is Jonathan Dayton, who also directed Battle of Sexes, and the other director was Valerie Faris, who directed that movie as well. So they must be like a little duo there. All right, and let's get into the summary. So, we're introduced to the Hoover family, and we get a glimpse into each family member's current state. So, basically, what's going on in their lives currently. We have Dad, whose name is Richard, and he is a struggling entrepreneur / author who is trying to turn his 9-step program into a book. And his 9-step program is all about being a winner, being positive, and just going after what you want, no matter what obstacles are in your way. Then we have the mom, whose name is Shirley, and she's just your typical mom trying to keep everything together, who is also the compassionate one towards everyone and just the one that's, keeping everyone together and somewhat centered. Then Shirley and Richard, they have 2 kids together. So we have Olive, who is considered a normal kid. To me, she does not look chunky, but during this time and the portrayal of who she is in this movie, she is considered a chunky kid. And the reason I say that is because it does matter to the plot of this film, but we're going to get to that. But she is an aspiring beauty pageant princess. And so then we have Dwayne, who's her brother, and he has basically taken a vow of silence because he wants to be a pilot, and pretty much he's not going to talk until he reaches that goal. I don't know particularly why he chose to be silent for that, because a pilot, not sure. I mean, they'll need their voice, but I don't know how crucial that is. So that was a very interesting choice, but yeah. Then we have Uncle Frank, who has basically just been released from the hospital after a failed suicide attempt. And then we have Richard's dad, Edwin Grandpa, who I did the quote at the beginning from him, who has a heroin addiction. And mind you, everyone in the family knows about this. Well, except Frank at this current time. All right. So the family pretty much, they're getting together for the first time. Now, of course, the grandpa, the kids, the mom and dad, they've all been together. But this is Frank's first time joining the family after, I don't know how long of a period of time he was kind of put away in this, I guess you could say like the psych ward or mental institution, so he could heal after his suicide attempt, or maybe it was just a hospital. But either way, he was in the hospital, he was away. And now he's finally joining the family for dinner. And so Olive is actually curious about Frank's bandage that he has on his wrist. And initially, Frank doesn't really jump at the idea of sharing this with Olive because she's about, I think, 7 or 8 at this point. So she is still a very young kid. And so he kind of looks to her mother, which is his sister, Cheryl, to see her thoughts on it. And she's completely fine with Frank sharing what happened to him because, you know what, at the end of the day, kids are going to be curious, and it's good to provide them with knowledge about certain things, even though it can seem too inappropriate for them. But every kid is different, and every kid takes in information differently. And I think it's good to provide that knowledge about different situations in life so that they can prepare for, these topics, coming across one way or another, whether it's at school, whether they hear it from another kid, whether they hear it on TV, or whatever the case may be. But what we do learn as they're kind of moving around this discussion, like they're not really saying anything initially, but as they're kind of maneuvering, trying to kind of sway, or they're trying to move Olive's attention from wanting to know about Frank. Richard is definitely not sympathetic at all with what happened to Frank. It's like he has no compassion whatsoever, because he's the type of guy who's kind of headstrong and like, if you give up on life, then you're a loser. And if you decide to take that route of, committing suicide, then, you're a weak person. And, he doesn't want to surround himself with weak people. But of course, since that's his brother-in-law, he has no choice but to, be around him, because Cheryl has decided to take in her brother to make sure, nothing happens to him, and to make sure she takes care of him, and, that nothing else like this happens. And so we also have Grandpa Edwin, who has his own reasons as to why he's not sympathetic either, because what we do learn is Frank is gay. And we're going to get to that, but I think that was more Grandpa's reason as to why he wasn't really sympathetic about it. But the grandpa is Richard's dad. So I guess maybe we can kind of see, as far as the mindset and not being so compassionate, that's where Richard gets that trait from. But anyway, so the mom decides that it's okay for Olive to know what happened to Frank, because, that's her uncle. And so initially Richard disagrees because he's like, she's a kid. She doesn't need to be hearing about this conversation. But obviously the mom wins in that little battle there. And so she lets Frank tell Olive what happened. And so basically Frank says, well, hey, I fell in love with a man who loves someone else. And then it wasn't that got me. And it wasn't that I lost my job and I had to move into this hotel. But it was because he had lost to this other man who was the second scholar or whatever. There was this grant, this prestigious grant that's given out to the most smartest people in the world, and they're the type of field he was in, and he had lost to him. And so that is what made him go on the brink of wanting to end his life. And so then, we have Richard chiming in, basically downplaying how he felt, even though people go through failures in life and everyone handles these type of situations differently. And instead of being compassionate, Richard decides to chime in, and he's like, yeah, and you know what? He made a bunch of bad, foolish decisions. And he just pretty much just downplays his emotions and just what he went through. And of course, the mom is like, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and kind of change the subject at this point, because obviously we know where Richard stands. We know how Frank feels, and we don't want to keep going to that dark place. So let's change the subject. And so Richard tells Olive, hey, how about basically you tell your uncle why you've been, practicing this routine a lot. And so she tells her uncle, Frank, there's this beauty pageant. I think it's Little Miss Chili Pepper or something. And she wants to enter it. And she started to get on this pageant kick when she went to go visit her aunt Cindy in Laguna in California. And she was able to enter in a pageant named Little Miss Sunshine. And she actually placed as runner up. And funny that she placed as runner up, because what ends up happening is Richard tells, his wife, he's like, hey, I heard something about Little Miss Sunshine on the voicemail. And so immediately, the mom goes to the voicemail because this Hello everyone, this is Bila Day. Sorry to interrupt this episode, but I just wanted to let you know that you were only listening to a preview. So if you would like to listen to the rest of this episode, then you can definitely go to the website, butmathat'smyfavoritemovie.com, or you can go directly to any of these platforms for the full episode. We are available on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Castbox. Please don't hesitate to follow the podcast on any of those platforms so that you can be notified anytime a new episode is available. If you didn't know, our primary release day is every Thursday, but be on the lookout for bonus content as well. Now, if you've listened to the But Ma, That's My Favorite Movie podcast before, that's awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. So if you have a friend that loves movies like we do, then definitely go ahead and share this podcast with them. And if you're a new listener and you do end up enjoying the podcast, well, then you go ahead and share with a friend too. Also, don't forget to like any of our social media pages so that you can also get updates and regular information about the podcast and about any of the episodes that are coming up. The social media sites that we have a presence on are Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And also, if you want to leave a review, whether constructive or positive, we'd appreciate that too. All right, go ahead and get over to one of the other platforms so we can finish getting into the rest of these movies.